Welcome back to the 50 State Cold Case Spotlight, and we are in North Dakota for day number 4, and we are in North Dakota for day number 4, and today I will be spotlighting the case of Sandra and John Jacobson. Sandra, 36, and her youngest son, John, 5, both lived in Bismarck, North Dakota, and were last seen November 16, 1996. Sandra had plans to take John over to her mother's house on University Drive area in Bismarck for dinner. On the way to her mother's house, Sandra had called the Bismarck Police Department from her cell phone. She was very upset, and she told officers that she believed a ritual satanic abuse was happening on a farm near Center, North Dakota, and that she was calling the Bismarck police over the Center Town Police in Oliver County because she didn't trust that police department. A transcript included in that original police report describes this call from Sandra, stating that she was very distraught and she believed that a loved one was in danger of being essayed at the hands of a demonic cult. Bismarck Police Department told her that since it was outside of their jurisdiction, there was nothing that they could do. Sandra's mother said that when Sandra arrived with John that evening around 7:30 p.m., it seemed like Sandra was having a mental health crisis, and Sandra did agree to let her mother take her to the hospital for help. Sandra agreed to go, but she told her mother that she wanted to get gas first. So Sandra took John and they got into their 1990 gray Honda Civic, and it turns out that they did stop at a gas station and purchase gas. However, Sandra never returned home to her mother's house. Around 10 p.m. is when Sandra's mom decides to call and report Sandra and John missing. The next day, Sandra's vehicle would be found abandoned in Centennial Beach parking lot near the Missouri River in Bismarck. Officers were not able to locate Sandra or John in the area. The driver's side door of the car was open, and her keys were in the ignition. Sandra's purse was sitting on the front seat, and it looked as if nothing in the purse had been disturbed. That day, there were strong river currents and severe weather that delayed their efforts because it was not safe for investigators to go into the river as thoroughly as they would have liked to at the beginning of the investigation due to that storm. Before Sandra's disappearance, she had separated from her second husband, Alan Jacobson, John's father, just about 3 months prior. During that separation, Sandra would move into a trailer with John and her older son, Spencer, 16 years old, from her previous marriage. Sandra and her family did believe that she was getting divorced and that was all being handled by her ex, Alan, and Sandra was concerned about some upcoming custody battles. When investigators spoke to her ex, Alan, he never mentioned that they were getting a divorce, and they would later find out through their investigation that there was never a divorce pending. Alan had never started the process. Alan also told investigators that November 16th day, he was on a business trip when Sandra and John disappeared in Missouri and didn't return until the 18th. However, investigators were never able to confirm that alibi. Beyond those few initial interviews in the beginning, Alan has not been cooperative with investigators. He refused to submit DNA and said that him and Sandra were actually reconciling and that they had signed up for couples therapy. However, the record shows that he never attended any of those appointments. After Sandra and John's disappearance, Sandra's family pled with investigators to please secure Sandra's trailer. But investigators didn't do that, and that allowed Alan to go into Sandra's trailer and remove items to include clothing and food. Because they didn't secure this trailer right away, investigators didn't get a chance to go in and look at Sandra's trailer before Alan cleared it out. Sandra's family said that Sandra kept a daily journal, and investigators asked Alan about this. He said he never found it in the home, and investigators have never been able to locate it. Spencer, Sandra's older son, said he saw his mother's wedding rings in a container at Alan's home a few days after his mother went missing, and he didn't understand why Alan had the rings and couldn't remember if his mother was wearing them the day she disappeared. Shortly after Sandra's disappearance, Alan would take over the trailer altogether and sell it. Since there was no legal divorce, he was able to claim all of her property. When Alan was questioned by investigators about these rings, he said that he believed that Sandra had left them when they first got separated. Investigators went on to ask him if he could take a polygraph test, and initially he agreed until they received a call from his lawyer a few days later saying that he would not be taking the test. Sandra's family members say they know that she was experiencing a mental health crisis the day that she disappeared, but they do not believe that she would take her own life or her son John's. They said she was an incredible mother who loved her children deeply. She was never even known to raise her voice around her children or her loved ones, and no one could fathom her causing harm to her children. In May of 1997, 6 months after Sandra and John disappear, investigators find a shoe near the river, and they ask Alan, "Does this look like John's shoe?" And he says it could be, but he's not sure. They then ask Sandra's mother and Sandra's son Spencer, who both say that that's not his shoe and it's probably too large for John's feet. Later in the investigation, investigators discovered that the day that Sandra had gone missing, she had earlier attempted to call her ex-husband Vernon Nestrom, Spencer's father, but was unable to reach him. When he was interviewed by investigators, he told investigators that during his marriage to Sandra, that she was fascinated and obsessed with the idea of the world ending and made a pact that if it looked like the world was going to end, they would meet and jump off the Memorial Bridge together. The Memorial Bridge is located close to where Sandra's vehicle was found after she went missing. Vernon did note that later on, though, Sandra did tell him that she thought suicide wasn't a good idea and it would condemn the victim's soul to walk the earth forever and they would never get a chance to enter heaven. He did agree to take a polygraph, and investigators say that they were able to rule him out as a suspect. In an unexpected and tragic twist, Vernon himself would be killed by a car in 2005 and left to die in a ditch on a maintenance road in Turtle, North Dakota. Investigators have ruled his case a homicide. The autopsy showed that he died of blunt force and trauma, and his case remains unsolved. However, they do not believe that it is connected to Sandra and John's disappearance. There are many theories that surround John and Sandra's disappearance. Some say that Sandra killed herself and took John with her. Others say that her ex-husband might have something to do with both of their disappearance. Shortly after their disappearance, Sandra's family did both have Sandra and John declared, but that didn't stop investigators from continuing to look for evidence in this case. Investigators state at this point there is no evidence pointing to foul play in their case, and they've never had a suspect. Investigators do believe that Sandra's journal could bring them answers in her case. Please keep sharing Sandra and John's story in hopes that we can bring investigators new leads. Any information in Sandra and John's case, you are asked to call the Bismarck Police Department at 701-223-1212. Thank you for taking the time to get to know John and Sandra today, and don't forget, every time you see those missing and murder posts on social media, hit like and share, because every time we share a face, we get closer to solving a case. And I will see you guys back here tomorrow for the last day of North Dakota, day 5.